In the heart of Montana's wilderness, where blizzards roar like beasts and darkness swallows all hope, an old woman faces a fateful trial. Eleanor, 72 years old, had long thought herself accustomed to the biting cold of brutal winters, until that fateful night, when a faint whimper amidst the storm led her to a mysterious creature, half alive, buried beneath the snow. It was more than just a dog, it was a wild soul, carrying the blood of wolves, a legend that had survived dangers beyond human imagination. But the story does not end with that harrowing rescue. In a small wooden cabin deep in the forest, a miraculous bond begins to form, between a lonely old woman and a four-legged warrior with eyes that burn like fire. Ghost, the name she gives it, does not just return from the brink of death, it brings mysteries beyond comprehension. It predicts storms, saves her from the grasp of death, and seems to understand every word she speaks. Yet, as the truth of Ghost's past unravels, a missing military asset, a being born to save, Eleanor must face the most heartbreaking choice of all: keep it by her side or let it return to its greater destiny? Step into this emotional journey, where loyalty, sacrifice, and unexpected miracles intertwine. Is Ghost merely an animal, or something far greater, transcending the boundary between humanity and nature? And when everything seems to end in sorrow, a gift from the past will change everything forever. Do not miss this tale of love, loss, and rebirth, a testament that even in the coldest darkness, the light of kindness can still shine. The wind howled through Montana's wilderness like a beast unchained after 1,000 years, tearing through the ancient treetops and shaking Eleanor's tiny wooden cabin. The pitch-black night had long settled, yet the blizzard showed no sign of relenting, growing fiercer, as if determined to swallow the world in an endless sea of white. Eleanor, a 72-year-old woman with silver hair and a frail frame, pulled an old, frayed wool sweater tighter around her as she struggled against the wind, hauling an armful of firewood toward the door. Her hands trembled from the cold, but her eyes remained resolute, a flame that had never once flickered in her. She had survived dozens of brutal winters in this land, but something about tonight's storm felt different, colder, crueler, like a living entity lurking in the shadows. Just as she reached the creaking wooden steps of her cabin, a sound cut through the howling wind. Small, faint, like the weak whimper of a fading creature. Eleanor froze, her breath turning into a misty cloud in the freezing air. She tilted her head, listening intently. Just the wind, she murmured to herself. But then it came again, a desperate, pained cry, muffled beneath thick layers of snow. Her heart pounded, an ominous feeling rising in her chest. Without a second thought, she let the firewood slip from her arms, the logs tumbling into the snow, and turned toward the sound. In this unforgiving wilderness, she knew one thing well: in the deadly cold, hesitation was the enemy of survival. The snow reached her knees, each step a battle against nature itself. The old lantern in her hand flickered, casting a dim, golden glow across the endless white, its light creating ghostly shadows that danced in the dark. The wind lashed at her face, trying to knock her down, but she pressed on, following the increasingly urgent whimper, a soft yet pleading cry. Then, through the blinding storm, she saw it. A small, dark shape, nearly swallowed by the endless white. Eleanor stumbled forward, dropping to her knees, the wind clawing mercilessly at her tattered coat. Before her lay a dog, no, something much larger. A giant German shepherd, its powerful body now feeble as it lay gasping in the midst of the storm. Half of its body was buried in the snow, its thick fur matted with ice and dried blood, its ears drooping lifelessly. Every breath was a desperate struggle, its chest rising and falling so weakly that she could barely tell if it was still alive. Eleanor raised a trembling hand to her mouth, choking back a sob. "Dear God, save us!" she whispered, her breath unsteady. The dog's eyes cracked open, dull with exhaustion, yet within them, a faint spark still flickered, a plea, a tiny flame refusing to go out. She could turn away. At her age, dragging such a heavy creature through the snow was nearly impossible. But that look held her in place. This was not just a dog, it was a soul fighting to survive, and she could not abandon it. "You will not die here," she said, her voice as firm as steel, even as her body trembled from the cold. With aged hands, she grasped its neck and pulled with all her strength, trying to free it from the frozen grip of the snow. The dog was heavy, heavier than the sack she used to carry in her youth, but she did not let go. The wind howled, whipping her silver hair from beneath her hood and numbing her gloved fingers. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her frail body protesting with every step through the snow. But she clenched her teeth, her eyes blazing with unshakable resolve. "Just get inside," she muttered like a prayer. At last, she dragged the dog to the doorway, her legs shaking, nearly giving out. Summoning her last ounce of strength, she pushed it inside and kicked the door shut behind them. The wind was sealed out, giving way to the warmth of the small cabin's fireplace. The flickering flames danced on the worn wooden walls, wrapping them in an invisible blanket. Eleanor collapsed onto the floor, panting, her chest heaving unevenly. The dog lay motionless on the tattered rug before the fire, completely still. Panic surged through her. Crawling forward, she ran trembling hands over its freezing fur. Its breathing was so faint that she had to press her ear against its body to hear it, a fragile rhythm, like a whisper on the wind. "No," she murmured, shaking her head fiercely. "Not yet." She hurried to grab the thickest wool blanket in the house and wrapped it tightly around its massive frame, but still, it did not respond. Refusing to give up, she rushed to the small kitchen, her hands shaking as she poured hot water from the kettle into an old wooden bowl. She dipped a cloth into the warmth and rubbed it over its limbs, desperately trying to coax heat back into its frozen body. "Come on, you have to live," she whispered, her voice breaking with despair. Nothing changed. Then memories cut through her like a blade, the storm that year, when the search team returned empty-handed, telling her that the snow had swallowed her son. Before that, her husband, who had barely survived the deadly cold. Twice she had watched helplessly as loved ones were taken from her. But tonight she swore she would not lose another, not even a strange dog. Clenching her jaw, she hurried to the stove, scooping up the last bit of soup from dinner. With the care of a mother, she lifted a spoonful and let a few warm drops trickle into its mouth. Time stretched unbearably, each second feeling like a century. Then, a faint twitch. So small she almost thought she imagined it. But no, its nose twitched, and a weak tremor rippled through its massive body. Eleanor held her breath, leaning in closer. Slowly, its eyes fluttered open, hazy, but alive. A shaky laugh escaped her lips, tears spilling down her wrinkled cheeks. "You're going to be okay," she whispered, her heart finally lighting up after years of darkness. "I won't let you go." The days that followed felt like a miracle, even to Eleanor. The dog, whom she named Ghost for its mysterious presence, not only survived but recovered at an astonishing pace. What had once been a lifeless body now pulsed with vitality. The patches of fur lost to frostbite grew back thick and glossy, and its eyes shone with a newfound sharpness. But what stunned her most was its intelligence. Ghost didn't just follow commands, it understood her. "Stay by the fire," she told it, and it immediately lay down, eyes never leaving her. Once she mumbled to herself, "It's going to rain soon," and Ghost lifted its head, gazing toward the door as if in agreement. Then, the strange signs began. One afternoon, as she was chopping wood outside, Ghost suddenly sprang up, ears alert, growling in warning. "What is it?" she asked, following its gaze. The sky was still clear. But just hours later, an unexpected hailstorm crashed down, nearly tearing apart the roof of her cabin. Another time, Ghost whimpered and nudged her toward the door moments before a whirlwind tore through, scattering her neatly stacked firewood. It was as if Ghost sensed danger before she even knew it was coming. One freezing morning, she stepped outside to fetch water from the well. Her foot slipped on a thin sheet of ice, and she fell, her heart leaping into her throat as the ground rushed toward her. But before she hit the ground, Ghost was there, moving like a shadow, bracing his sturdy body beneath her. Clutching his fur, she gasped for breath, her heart pounding. "What are you, Ghost?" she whispered, staring into his glowing golden eyes. Ghost simply stood there, watching her, not like a dog awaiting praise, but like a being that fully understood the weight of that moment. For the first time, Eleanor wondered whether she had rescued a dog, or something far greater. On a freezing morning, as she stepped out to fetch water from the well, her foot slipped on a thin layer of ice. She tumbled forward, her heart leaping as the ground rushed toward her. But before she could hit the earth, the ghost was there, a dark shadow streaking forward, its sturdy body breaking her fall. She clung to its fur, gasping, her heart pounding. "What are you, ghost?" she whispered, gazing deep into its glowing golden eyes. It simply stood there, looking back at her, not like a dog awaiting praise, but like a being that understood the weight of the moment. For the first time, Eleanor wondered if she had saved a dog, or something much greater. As time passed, the ghost became her constant companion. Every morning, as Eleanor brewed coffee in her tiny kitchen, it lay by the fireplace, ears twitching at the sound of birds outside. It was more than an animal. It was a presence, a silent guardian that made the cabin feel less empty. But one day, that peace was shattered by a firm knock at the door. In this deep forest, no one ever visited her. Eleanor frowned, setting her coffee cup down, her hand tightening around the worn handle of an old dagger before she approached the door. She cracked it open, and the cold wind rushed in. Standing before her was a tall man in his late 40s, clad in a thick coat dusted with snow, his weathered face lined with hardship. "I'm John Carter," he said, his voice deep but polite. "Sorry to intrude, but I'm looking for something, or someone." Eleanor tightened her grip on the door, her gaze wary. "I live alone." But John's eyes moved past her, landing on the ghost, which stood tense at her side, its golden eyes locked onto him. "God," he whispered, his voice trembling. "It's him. The ghost. He's my ghost now," Eleanor said firmly. "How do you know him?" John sighed, rubbing his frostbitten face. "Because he's not just a dog," he said. "He's a legend." He explained that the ghost had once belonged to an elite military rescue unit, trained for the most perilous missions, finding and saving lives in conditions no human could endure. 2 months ago, he went missing during a blizzard in Glacier National Park, John continued. That night he saved 3 people, pulling them from an avalanche. But as we were about to evacuate, a second avalanche struck. We thought he was dead. Eleanor stared at the ghost, who stood still, listening, as if understanding every word. "He's not just a dog," John added. "His mother was a North American gray wolf we rescued and rehabilitated. That wolf blood made him stronger, faster, more resilient than any other dog. That's why he survived." She felt the weight of those words settle in her chest. The ghost, the creature she had saved from death, was not merely an animal. He was a warrior, a survivor. "I owe him my life," John said, his voice low. "My whole team does. If he's happy here, I won't force him to leave. But I need to know, does he remember me?" He stepped forward, his hand trembling. Eleanor held her breath as the ghost tensed, its gaze shifting between her and John. In that moment she realized the ghost's fate was not entirely in her hands. That night, the cabin was heavy with silence. Eleanor sat in her old rocking chair, the firelight casting shadows across her wrinkled face. The ghost lay by the hearth, his golden eyes glowing. "You were born for something greater," she whispered, running her fingers through his thick fur. "Not to stay here with an old woman like me." She told him about her life, about the husband she had lost, the son taken by the snow, the loneliness that had clung to her for years. "Then you came," she said, her voice breaking. "And I wasn't alone anymore." The ghost pressed his head into her hand, comforting her in that moment of farewell. The next morning, John arrived. The ghost stepped toward the door, but before leaving, he turned back one last time. His golden eyes burned like fire, as if saying goodbye. "Go be a hero," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks. He stood there for a moment, then turned and walked away with John. The door closed, and the cabin fell into silence. Time passed, and winter slowly gave way to warmer days. But the cabin was no longer the same. The ghost's presence had vanished, leaving a void she couldn't fill. She knew she had done the right thing, letting him go so he could fulfill his purpose, but the loneliness gnawed at her every day. Then one morning, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, the handwriting unfamiliar but careful. Her hands trembled as she opened it. A photograph slipped into her lap, the ghost, amidst an avalanche, pulling a boy from the wreckage. His eyes were sharp, his body brimming with strength. The letter read, "Eleanor, I thought you'd want to see this. The ghost saved a boy last week, finding him beneath meters of snow before we even arrived. Without him, the child wouldn't have survived. You were right, he was born to be a hero. He hasn't forgotten you." The final line made her heart pound. "Check your porch." She rushed to the door and flung it open. On the wooden porch, a small puppy sat, its golden eyes identical to the ghost's, gazing up at her. A note was tucked into its collar. "The ghost left you something. Hope you're not lonely anymore." Eleanor knelt, scooping the pup into her arms, tears streaming down her face, not from loss, but from joy. "Welcome home, little one," she whispered. From that day on, the cabin was filled with life again. The pup, whom she named Little Ghost, was more than a gift, he was a miracle, a bridge connecting her to the ghost. And somewhere out there, she knew the ghost was still saving lives, living his destiny. But he hadn't forgotten her, and through Little Ghost, he had sent her a new companion, a new beginning. Eleanor's story is proof that kindness and love are never forgotten. She saved the ghost from death, and he repaid her with a miracle beyond imagination. If this story moves your heart, imagine how many more miraculous tales are waiting to be told, stories of loyalty, second chances, and the unbreakable bond between humans and animals. Stay tuned for more, because sometimes, the love of a creature is not just companionship, it is a light in the darkness. Winter in Montana slowly faded, giving way to the first rays of sunshine piercing through the thinning snow. Eleanor's wooden cabin still stood, quiet in the deep woods, but it was no longer empty. On the porch, Little Ghost, the pup with golden eyes, a fragment of the ghost's soul, bounded playfully, bringing back the laughter she thought was lost forever. Every time she looked into those eyes, she felt the ghost's presence, whispering that he had never truly left. Far away, among the icy peaks of Glacier National Park, the ghost continued his journey. His strong legs carried him through the snow, pulling lives back from the edge of death, his eyes glowing like fire guiding the way through darkness. He was a hero, just as he was meant to be, but Eleanor knew, in the heart of that warrior, there would always be a place for her, the old woman who had saved him from the abyss. One evening, as the sunset bathed the snowy fields in gold, Eleanor sat in her rocking chair, Little Ghost curled at her feet. She opened the last letter from John Carter, accompanied by a photograph, the ghost standing tall in a storm, a rescued child clinging to him. The scrawled words on the back read, "He still remembers you, Eleanor. Every time he saves someone, I see him look toward your cabin." Tears slipped down her cheeks, but this time, not from sorrow. They were tears of joy, of gratitude, of a bond that would never break. She looked toward the distant horizon, where the ghost was living his destiny. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling, "for giving me a family again." Little Ghost lifted his head, pressing close to her hand as if he understood. And in that moment, amidst the lingering cold of winter, Eleanor felt warmth, not just from the pup beside her, but from the wild soul that had changed her life.